The peace of a post-snap world was not a vibrant, living thing. It was a fragile, hollow silence that rang with the echoes of those who had been returned and those who had been changed forever. For 5 years, the universe had mourned, and for the following months, it had struggled to breathe again. In the heart of the new SWORD headquarters, a massive orbital station known as the Peak, Commander Shepard stood before a panoramic window, watching the curvature of the Earth. Her N7 armor, now reinforced with a vibranium nanotech weave provided by Shuri, hummed with a low, rhythmic power. She was no longer a stranger in a strange land. She was a veteran of 2 wars, a survivor of 2 galaxies, and the woman who had taught Earth's heroes that preparation was the only true shield against extinction. She wasn't looking at the planet for its beauty. Her cybernetic eyes, enhanced by the Lazarus Project and refined by Stark Industries optics, were scanning the deep space telemetry. To the rest of the world, the threat was gone. Thanos was ash. The stones were reduced to atoms. But Shepard knew that in a multiverse of infinite possibilities, victory was merely a temporary ceasefire. She had seen the Reaper's patience. She had seen how the Void eventually reached back. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. With great power comes great responsibility. Commander, the telemetry from the quantum space buoy in the Andromeda sector is showing a spike, a voice said behind her. Monica Rambeau stepped onto the observation deck, her own energy signature flickering beneath her skin. Since the events in Westview, Monica had become Shepard's primary liaison to the superhuman side of SWORD. It's not Kree, and it's not Skrull. It's dark energy, high frequency, concentrated, and pulsing in a pattern I've never seen. Shepard turned, her expression unreadable. Show me. Monica tapped her wrist, projecting a holographic map of the local cluster. A pinprick of violet light was thrumming in the darkness between stars. It's element 0, Shepard, but the isotopic signature is wrong. It's denser. It's as if it's being pulled through from a reality where the laws of physics are slightly more aggressive. Shepard felt a cold, familiar jolt of adrenaline. She had been the one to introduce element 0 to this universe, synthesizing small amounts for the Normandy's drive core. But this signal was massive. That's not a natural deposit, Monica. That's a transit wake. Something is using a mass effect field to punch through the multiversal barrier. We thought the multiverse was Doctor Strange's problem, Monica noted, her brow furrowing. Magic, spells, alternate versions of Spider-Man. Magic is just science we don't understand yet, Shepard countered, quoting a man she had respected in another life. And the multiverse isn't just a collection of different people. It's a collection of different threats. If the barrier is thin enough for a sorcerer to walk through, it's thin enough for a machine to tear through. The alarm on the station began to wail, a deep, resonant tone that signaled a level 9 breach. Shepard didn't wait for a briefing. She broke into a run, her boots clattering against the metallic floor. Edie, get the Normandy prepped. I want the weapons hot and the stealth drive on standby. Commander, the ship's voice echoed through her internal comms. I am detecting multiple gravitational anomalies within the Sol system. They are manifesting in the blind spots of our orbital sensors. They appear to be using a sophisticated form of quantum cryptography to mask their signatures. Shepard reached the hangar, where the SR-3 Normandy sat like a tethered predator. Peter Parker, now older and wearing a suit that blended Stark's tech with Shepard's N7 aesthetic, was already there, checking his web shooters. Commander, you seeing this? Peter asked, his voice a mix of excitement and genuine dread. My spider sense it's not just tingling, it's screaming, like 1,000 voices all hitting the same bad note. Strap in, kid, Shepard commanded, vaulting into the Normandy's airlock. We're going to see what's knocking on our door. The Normandy cleared the hangar in a blur of repulsor fire and mass effect fields. As they breached the upper atmosphere, the stars didn't just twinkle, they seemed to bleed. A massive, jagged rift in spacetime had opened near the moon, a fracture in reality that didn't glow with the orange sparks of a sling ring, but with the cold, sickly violet of a Reaper beam. From the rift, a shape emerged. It wasn't a ship. It was a nightmare. It was a Reaper, but it was wrong. Its metallic hull was covered in shifting, iridescent scales that seemed to absorb the light. It didn't move with the mechanical rigidity Shepard remembered. It pulsed, its limbs elongated and twisted, as if it had been processed by the very multiverse it had crossed. And trailing behind it, swarming like locusts, were things that made Shepard's blood turn to ice. Husks, Shepard whispered, watching the zoom view on the main screen. But they're not human, or Taurian, or Krogan. Commander, Edie's voice was sharp, identifying the biometrics of the boarding craft. They are Chitauri, but their physiology has been fused with synthetic implants. They are being controlled by a central hive mind signal originating from the lead entity. The Reapers aren't just here to harvest our galaxy, Shepard realized, her hand tightening on the armrest of her chair.
They've been harvesting the multiverse. They've been jumping from reality to reality, collecting the best of every world, refining themselves into the ultimate extinction event. The lead Reaper let out a sound, a deep, mechanical roar that vibrated through the Normandy's hull, a sound that bypassed the ears and struck directly at the soul. It was the call of the harvest, a sound Shepard had hoped she would never hear again. "They're heading for the peak," Monica yelled from the tactical station. "If they take the station, they have access to the entire Sword satellite network. They can indoctrinate the planet in hours." Shepard stood up. The blue light of her biotics began to hum around her fists. "ED, get the Normandy prepped. Set the Thanos cannon to maximum output. Peter, Monica, get to the airlocks. We're not just defending a station today, we're defending the border of reality." The Normandy surged forward, a lone silver needle aimed at the heart of a multiversal god. Shepard felt the familiar weight of the mission. She had united a galaxy once. Now she would have to unite a multiverse, because the Reapers aren't just machines anymore. They were the ghost of every world that had already fallen. Word count 1084. Awaiting continue.
The vacuum of space was no longer a silent void. It was a screaming canvas of violet energy and fractured light. The SR-3 Normandy banked hard to port, its kinetic barriers flaring into brilliant cerulean sheets as a beam from the lead Reaper, a creature of twisted multiversal geometry, grazed the hull. Inside the cockpit, the atmosphere was a pressurized staccato of alarms and tactical readouts. Commander Shepard stood behind the pilot's chair, her hands gripping the backrest so hard the leather groaned. Her eyes were fixed on the monstrosity ahead. It wasn't just a machine, it was a breach in the very concept of existence, a jagged silhouette that seemed to vibrate between two different frames of reality. "Dana Cannon is at 80% charge, Commander," EDI reported, her holographic avatar flickering with a static discharge from the nearby rift. However, the target's displacement is erratic. It is not occupying a single point in spacetime. My targeting algorithms are struggling to compensate for its dimensional facing. "Then stop trying to predict where it is and start shooting where it will be," Shepard barked. "Monica, can you stabilize the localized field? Give EDI a solid target." Monica Rambeau, currently a shimmering entity of pure electromagnetic energy, hovered near the tactical station. Her form pulsed with a blinding white light. "I can try to anchor its frequency, but Shepard, that thing isn't just breathing, it's broadcast. It's putting out a signal that's hitting the station's crew. They're reporting hallucinations, paranoia, violent outbursts." "Indoctrination," Shepard muttered, the word tasting like copper in her mouth. "They've adapted the signal to bypass human neural architecture by using the multiversal bleed. It's not just a psychic attack anymore, it's a reality-warping suggestion." Suddenly, the air in the center of the Normandy's bridge sparked. A familiar, circular portal of orange sparks swirled into existence, cutting through the sterile blue light of the ship's interior. Dr. Stephen Strange stepped through, his cloak of levitation billowing as if caught in a high-altitude gale. He looked haggard, his brow furrowed with a depth of concern that Shepard hadn't seen since the days leading up to the snap. "Commander," Strange said, his voice resonant and urgent, "you need to cease fire. Immediately." Shepard didn't look away from the view screen. "Doctor, that thing is about to turn a sword station into a processing plant. I'm not standing down." "If you destroy that entity here, you will trigger an incursion," Strange countered, stepping between Shepard and the screen. "That Reaper is not a native of this universe, nor is it a mere intruder. It is a focal point. It has anchored itself to the scent you left behind when you crossed the threshold from your world to ours. You are a beacon event, Shepard. Your presence here didn't just bring a hero, it brought a trail of breadcrumbs through the multiverse." Shepard finally turned, her eyes narrowed. "A trail? I've been here for years, Strange. Why now?" "Because the walls are thin," Strange explained, gesturing to the rift outside. "The events with the stones, the tampering with the timeline, the cracks in the sanctums, it has created a vacuum. In your universe, the Reapers are a cycle of harvest. In the multiverse, they have become a plague of opportunism. They don't just harvest life, they harvest realities. They find a world that is already wounded, follow the signature of a high-level anomaly, that would be you, and they begin the process of correction. They see the Marvel Universe as a chaotic variable that needs to be synthesized into their new order." A massive shudder rocked the ship. The Reaper had fired again, this time hitting the peak station directly. The orbital platform tilted on its axis, fires venting into the void. "Then what's the plan, Sorcerer?" Peter Parker asked, his voice cracking through the ship's intercom from the hangar. "We cannot fight it with conventional force," Strange said, his hands moving in complex mystical patterns. "We must sever its connection to the beacon. I can temporarily shroud your signature, Shepard, but that thing is already tethered to the peak's mainframe. It's looking for the citadel of this world." "The Citadel?" Shepard's mind raced. In her world, the Citadel was the heart of galactic government and the catalyst for the Reaper invasion. It's looking for a hub, something that connects everything. It's thinking the Sword network is the relay, Monica realized, her form growing brighter.
It's trying to hijack the satellite array to broadcast the indoctrination signal to the entire planet simultaneously. Shepard grabbed her rifle, her biotics flaring into a low hum around her shoulders. Then we don't destroy it in space. We board it. We take the fight into its own internal reality and cut the connection from the inside. Strange, can you get us onto that thing without us being turned into cosmic dust? Strange nodded grimly. I can shield a small boarding party from the dimensional shearing, but once you are inside, you will be in a space where Marvel's laws of physics and the Reaper's logic of synthesis are in a state of violent flux. Your biotics, your tech, even your memories, they will be under assault. I've walked through the heart of a Reaper before, Shepard said, her voice dropping into that cold, professional tone that meant the commander had taken over. Peter, Monica, get to the airlock. Strange, you're our ticket in. EDI, maintain distance and keep the Thanic cannon focused on the rift. If we don't make it out, you collapse the fracture, whatever it takes. Acknowledged, Shepard, EDI reported. Though I calculate the probability of your survival in a dimensionally unstable environment at less than 7%. I've had worse hots, Shepard said, heading for the lift. As they gathered in the airlock, the four of them, a soldier, a sorcerer, a spectrum of light, and a spider, the Reaper outside let out another bone-shaking roar. It wasn't just a sound, it was a promise of an ending. Shepard checked her thermal clips, her Omni tool glowing a steady, defiant orange. She had come to this universe to save it from a Titan, and she had succeeded. But now, her own past had caught up with her, wearing the skin of a multiversal god. One thing, Doctor, Shepard said as Strange began the spell to transport them across the void. You said I was the beacon. If I'm the reason they're here, am I the only way to stop them? Strange looked at her, his expression unreadable. You are the anchor, Shepard. If the anchor breaks, the ship drifts. But if the anchor is too heavy, it pulls the ship under. Typical, Shepard muttered. No easy choices. The orange sparks of the portal expanded, swallowing them whole. The Normandy vanished, replaced by a world of shifting metallic corridors and screaming iridescent walls. They were inside the Reaper, and for the first time in a long time, Commander Shepard felt like the harvest had already begun.
The interior of the multiversal Reaper was not a place of metal and wires. It was a cathedral of synthetic flesh and screaming geometry. As the orange sparks of Doctor Strange's portal faded, Shepard stepped onto a floor that felt like a bridge made of frozen lightning. The walls were translucent, pulsating with a sickly violet light that revealed the churning gears of a nightmare. One moment, the corridors looked like the sleek obsidian halls of a collector base. The next, they shifted into the jagged crystalline structures of the negative zone. Gravity was a suggestion at best, pulling Shepard's boots toward the ceiling before snapping them back to a floor that rippled like liquid mercury. Stay within the perimeter of the Eldritch Shield, Strange commanded, his hands glowing with a steady protective radiance. The laws of causality are being shredded here. If you step outside my influence, you might find yourself 10 minutes in the past or 1,000 miles in the future. Shepard adjusted the grip on her M8 Avenger, her HUD struggling to map the shifting terrain. Her helmet's visor flickered with ghost images, reflections of her own past on the Citadel, intercut with visions of the Avengers Tower in ruins. It's not just a ship, Doctor. It's a digestive system. It's breaking down the physics of our universe to prepare for the harvest. Monica Rambeau hovered at the edge of the shield, her eyes glowing with an intense spectral light. I can see the data streams. They're horrific. It's not just binary code. It's a merger of genetic memories and quantum signatures. Shepard, this thing isn't just building husks, it's building prototypes. What kind of prototypes? Peter Parker asked, his voice tight with an uncharacteristic edge of panic. He was climbing to the floor with his hands and feet, his spider sense clearly overwhelmed by the cacophony of the Reaper's internal logic. Because my spider sense is telling me that we are definitely not the first people to come in here, and whatever happened to the last guys, it wasn't a friendly greeting. The answer came in the form of a mechanical hiss that vibrated through their very bones. From the ceiling, several pods descended, their biometallic shells peeling back like rotted fruit. What fell out were not the shambling, mindless husks Shepard had fought on Earth. These were different. They were sleek, four-armed monstrosities, weaved in flickering orange energy, a terrifying fusion of Chitauri physiology and the glowing cybernetic enhancements of the Lazarus Project. They're using my combat data, Shepard whispered, her blood turning to ice. They're building soldiers based on the very tech that brought me back to life. But the true horror emerged from the largest pod in the center of the hall. It was a humanoid figure, its body composed of a dark vibranium-like metal that shimmered with the red chaos magic of the Scarlet Witch. Its face was a featureless mask of violet light, and its right arm was a jagged metallic replica of the Winter Soldier's prosthetic. It didn't roar, it simply emitted a high-frequency electronic whine that shattered the nearby crystalline walls.
Identifying target, Edie's voice crackled through Shepard's comms, distorted by the dimensional interference. Biometric analysis suggests a 94% match for a multiversal variant of Pietro Maximoff, processed through a Stark Ultron chassis and infused with Reaper logic. It is a Synthesis Prime. A fallen hero, Strange said, his voice grim. A perfect weapon. The Synthesis Prime moved with a speed that defied the laws of motion. It didn't run, it simply occupied different points in space-time until it was directly in front of them. Shepard's biotics flared instinctively, her shockwave rippling through the air to push the creature back. The creature caught the biotic energy in its palm, its red and violet armor absorbing the blast before firing it back as a concentrated beam of pure force. "Scatter!" Shepard yelled. Strange threw up a series of Tau mandalas, absorbing the impact, but the force of the blast sent the team reeling. Monica surged forward, turning herself into a beam of gamma radiation that punched through the Synthesis Prime's chest. The creature's wound didn't bleed, it simply knitted itself back together with a hiss of nanites and magical residue. "You can't just hit it," Strange shouted, over the roar of the combat. "It exists across multiple frequencies. Monica, you need to phase shift. Peter, use your webs to anchor its physical form to this reality." Peter didn't hesitate. He launched a barrage of high-tensile vibranium-reinforced webs coating the creature's limbs. "I'm trying, but it's like trying to tie down a shadow." Shepard didn't wait for a tactical opening. She created one. She activated her biotic charge. Her body became a streak of blue light that slammed into the Synthesis Prime. The impact was like hitting a mountain made of cold, hard logic. She followed with a nova. The biotic explosion flared bright enough to illuminate the darkest corners of the Reaper's gut. In that moment of blinding light, she saw them, the pods, thousands of them. Each one contained a different variant of a hero she knew. A version of Steve Rogers weaved in Reaper tech plates. A version of Natasha Romanoff with cybernetic limbs designed for stealth phasing. The Reapers hadn't just come to harvest the people. They had come to harvest the heroism. They were creating a multiversal legion of champions, stripped of their will and turned into the ultimate vanguard of the harvest. "Strange, look." She pointed to the processing banks. "They're not just killing them, they're refining them. This is what the incursion really is. It's a merger of realities into a single synthetic order." The Synthesis Prime recovered, its red magic flaring as it prepared for a devastating area of effect attack. "The cycle must continue," a voice whispered, not through the comms, but directly into their minds. It was the voice of the Reaper, a cold, vast intelligence that made Thanos' ambition feel small. "Your chaos is inefficient. Your free will is a flaw. We are the correction. We are the synthesis of all that was and all that will be." Shepard felt the weight of indoctrination trying to worm its way into her psyche. She saw images of the elusive man, of Sauron, of the choices she had made. "Is this so different?" the voice whispered. "Did you not use the Crucible to rewrite the galaxy? Did you not play God to save it?" "Shut up!" Shepard roared, her biotics turning a violet, unstable violet. She slammed her Omniblade into the Synthesis Prime's neck, the orange energy clashing against the red chaos magic. With a final, desperate surge of power, Monica and Peter combined their attacks, a burst of electromagnetic energy and physical force that momentarily destabilized the creature's form. Strange seized the moment, casting a binding spell of the crimson bands of Cytocroc, anchoring the Prime to the ground. "We need to move now," Strange yelled. "The central core is just ahead. If we can disrupt the signal, we can stop the processing." As they ran toward the glowing violet heart of the Reaper, she looked back at the Synthesis Prime, which was already beginning to break free of the mystical chains. She realized that they weren't just fighting a machine, they were fighting an idea that said safety was better than freedom, and that order was worth the price of the soul. "Commander," Edie's voice came through, sounding clear but more urgent. "The Normandy is under heavy fire. The rift is expanding. If you don't shut that core down in the next 5 minutes, the incursion will become irreversible. The Reapers will have a permanent bridge into the Marvel multiverse." Shepard didn't answer. She just ran faster. She had saved one galaxy from the harvest. She wouldn't let this one fall because she was too afraid of her own shadow.
Section 4. The deeper they ventured into the Reaper's thoracic hull, the more the architecture began to resemble a surgical nightmare. This wasn't the cold industrial steel of a sovereign-class machine. It was a cathedral of what-ifs. As they moved, the walls bled data, cascades of binary intermingled with the golden, shimmering code of the Marvel multiverse. Shepard walked with her rifle tight to her shoulder, her boots making a wet, metallic sound on the deck. The air here was thick with the scent of ozone and the coppery tang of processed blood. To her left, transparent vats held versions of heroes she barely recognized. A Captain America with the 4 arms of a pro-husk, a Black Widow whose stealth suit was grafted directly into her nervous system. "This is a library," Peter Parker whispered, his voice trembling as he stared at a tank containing a variant of himself, one where the spider silk was replaced by glowing, synthetic neural tentacles. They're not just killing us, they're archiving us. They're taking every version of every hero that ever failed and turning them into a blueprint for the next harvest. Focus, Peter, Shepard said, her voice a sharp, disciplined snap. She didn't look at the vats. She had seen the dragon's teeth on horizon. She had seen the Reaper Tech human Reaper larva in the heart of the collector base. She knew that sentiment was a luxury they couldn't afford in the belly of the beast. Strange, how close are we to the logic core? Dr. Strange didn't answer immediately. He was standing in the center of a circular chamber, his hands glowing with the light of the Vishanti as he held back the encroaching violet mist of the Reaper's indoctrination signal. The core is just beyond this threshold, Commander, but we are no longer the only guests in this house of horrors. A sudden rhythmic thrumming vibrated through the floor, a sound that wasn't the mechanical heartbeat of the Reaper. It was a synchronized temporal hum. From the shadows of the Hall of Variants, a figure emerged. He didn't wear the bioorganic armor of the Reapers or the mystical robes of a sorcerer. He wore a suit of high-tech violet and green plate mail that shimmered with the chronal energy of 1,000 eras. A translucent blue mask covered his face, and in his hand he held a scepter that pulsed with the power of the quantum realm. Commander Shepard, the figure said, his voice a resonant multi-tonal chord that seemed to echo from several directions at once. The anomaly who dared to survive the end of her own universe. I have been watching your beacon for quite some time. Kang, Monica Rambeau hissed, her form flaring into a brilliant ultraviolet spectrum. She moved into a defensive stance, her eyes locked on the time traveler. This is my multiverse, the Kang variant replied, stepping into the center of the chamber with an arrogant, measured grace. I am the Prime Centurion, and I find your Reapers to be a most fascinating, if somewhat uncouth, variable. They are an entropic force, a cosmic janitor meant to clean up the mess of free will. Normally, I would find their goals admirable. Efficiency is, after all, the hallmark of a true ruler. You want to work with them? Shepard asked, her biotics flaring into a low hum around her shoulders. She didn't lower her rifle. The Centurion let out a short, dry laugh. Hardly. The Reapers are a blunt instrument. They want to synthesize all life into a single predictable order. I, however, prefer the infinite diversity of a timeline I can shape. But these machines, they have access to a data stream I find very intriguing. They have been through the back doors of reality. They have seen the end of the previous multiverse. They possess the archives of the precursors. He looked at Shepard, his blue mask reflecting her own defiant gaze. And you, Shepard, are the key to unlocking those archives. Your soul is a unique isotopic signature, a bridge between the physics of your world and the magic of this one. To the Reapers, you are a bug in the system that needs to be corrected. To me, you are the ultimate decryption key. I'm not a tool for your experiments, Kang, Shepard stated, her voice dropping into that cold, lethal register. You are whatever I need you to be, the Centurion replied. He raised his scepter, and the air around Shepard began to warp. A localized temporal bubble began to form, slowing her movements to a crawl. I propose a bargain, Commander. I will help you destroy this Reaper. I will collapse the rift and save your Earth from the harvest. In exchange, you will come with me to the Chronopolis. You will allow me to map your signature, to understand how a mortal soul can survive a total reality collapse. With your data, I can stabilize the multiverse under my own design. No more incursions, no more chaos. She's not going anywhere with you, Peter Parker shouted, launching a web line of the Centurion scepter. The Kang variant didn't even turn. He simply swiped a hand through the air and the web line disintegrated into dust, not from force, but from age. The boy is a nuisance. Strange, you of all people should understand the necessity of this sacrifice. The Reapers will not stop. They are a multiversal virus. Even if you destroy the ship, 100 more are waiting in the dark spaces between realities. My offer is the only one that ensures the survival of your precious Marvel world. Strange's brow was furrowed, his hands still maintaining the shield. He looked at Shepard, and for a fleeting second, the commander saw a terrible flicker of calculation in the sorcerer's eyes. He had seen the 14 million possibilities before. He knew the price of victory. The Centurion is right about one thing, Shepard, Strange said quietly. The Reapers are a multiversal constant. We can't win a war of attrition against an enemy that harvests time itself. There's always another way, Shepard said, her biotics surging, fighting the temporal bubble with the sheer force of her Mass Effect fields. In my world, I was told the Reapers were inevitable, that I had to choose between control, synthesis, or destruction. I chose to fire the Crucible. I chose to give the galaxy a chance to figure out its own future, not one dictated by a machine or a god. She snapped her eyes to Kang, and I'm not giving you that chance either. Monica, blow the core, now! The Centurion's expression hardened. Unfortunate. I
had hoped for a more civilized transition. He raised his scepter again, but before he could fire, the Reaper itself responded. The floor beneath them erupted as several Synthesis Prime units, those twisted multiversal husks, surged from the vats. The Reaper's indoctrination had realized that the recruiter was just as much of a threat as the infiltrators. "Well," Peter said, landing in a crouch beside Shepard as the temporal bubble collapsed under the strain of the Reaper's interference. "The enemy of my enemy is also my enemy. This is getting really complicated, Commander." "It's a three-way fight," Shepard yelled, her rifle already firing at a charging Prime unit. "Strange, hold the Centurion off. Monica, get to that core. Peter, on me. We're going to show this machine what happens when you try to archive a soldier who isn't done fighting." The chamber erupted into a chaotic symphony of violet Reaper beams, orange chronal blasts, and the blue flare of Shepard's biotics. The Centurion was a whirlwind of temporal manipulation, freezing Synthesis units in time before shattering them with a thought. Strange engaged him in a duel of mystical and scientific mastery that warped the very air between them. Shepard moved through the carnage with a predator's focus. She wasn't fighting for a timeline or a design. She was fighting for the people in those vats, for the world she had grown to love, and for the right of every living thing to be messy, chaotic, and free. As she reached the threshold of the core, she felt the Reaper's vast, cold mind trying to crush her will. "You are an anomaly," it whispered. "You are a fragment of a dead world. Let us make you whole again." "I'm already whole," Shepard grunted, slamming a fresh thermal clip into her rifle. "I'm a commander, and this ship is about to be decommissioned."
The chamber of the logic core was a cathedral of data, where the laws of physics had been discarded like obsolete blueprints. In the center of the vast circular room sat a pulsating sphere of violet and gold energy, the singularity of wills. It wasn't merely a power source, it was the Reaper's processing center for an entire reality. Thousands of neural tendrils, glowing with a sickly bioluminescence, reached out from the core and plugged into the variants suspended in the walls, draining their heroic potential to fuel the harvest. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and the rhythmic, bone-deep thrum of a machine that was currently rewriting the soul of a multiverse. "Monica, the frequency, match the core's oscillation," Shepard shouted over the roar of a chronal storm. To her right, Dr. Strange was locked in a hypnotic dance of light and shadow with the Prime Centurion. The Kang variant moved with a stuttering, non-linear grace, his scepter carving arcs of green energy that aged the Reaper's metallic floor in seconds. Strange countered with the crimson bands, weaving them into a containment field that vibrated with the tension of two gods fighting for the steering wheel of time. "I'm on it, Shepard, but the core is shielded by a quantum-locked layer." Monica Rambeau's voice was a multi-tonal resonance. She was no longer humanoid. She was a shimmering silhouette of white-hot electromagnetic force, darting between the neural tendrils like a bolt of living lightning. "I need someone to pull the physical safeties. They're guarded by the synthesis units." "Peter, with me." Shepard didn't wait for a response. She vaulted over a railing, her kinetic barriers flaring as a barrage of violet pulse fire from a synthesis Stark drone peppered her position. Peter Parker swung into action, his movements a blur of red and blue against the obsidian backdrop. "You know, back in Queens, the biggest problem was a guy in a rhino suit. This is significantly more complicated, Commander." He fired a web line at the Stark drone, yanking it into the path of a charging synthesis Hulk, a massive gray-skinned abomination wreathed in Reaper tech plates that roared with a mechanical, distorted voice. The impact was thunderous, but the Reaper's internal defenses were limitless. For every unit they destroyed, another emerged from the processing bats. Shepard hit the floor in a roll. Her M8 Avenger barked in 3-round bursts, shattering the optical sensors of a synthesis Widow that was trying to line up a shot. She felt the weight of the Reaper's mind pressing against her again, a cold, heavy indoctrination that whispered of her failures. "You couldn't save Anderson," the voice hissed. "You couldn't save the Geth. You couldn't save Tony Stark. Let us archive your grief. Let us give it purpose." "My grief has plenty of purpose," Shepard grunted, slamming a fresh thermal clip into her rifle. She unleashed a shockwave, the biotic ripple tearing through the floor and sending a squad of husks flying into the abyss. She reached the first safety pylon, a jagged metallic pillar that hummed with the same energy as the core. It required a manual override, a brute force disconnection of the Reaper's Neuralink. Shepard grabbed the handle, her Omni-tool glowing a fierce orange as it began the decryption. The metal burned through her gloves, the Reaper's internal temperature spiking as it realized the parasite was touching its heart. "Shepard, move!" Peter's warning came just as the Prime Centurion bypassed Strange's shield for a split second. A bolt of green chronal energy struck the pylon, shattering the time lock and throwing Shepard backward. The Kang variant landed near the core, his blue mask glowing with triumph.
Enough of this primitive struggle. Strange, you lack the vision to see what must be done. The Reapers are a symptom of a decaying multiverse. If I take the core, I take the data. I can stabilize the incursions before they erase us all. You'll stabilize them under your boot, Kang, Strange roared, his cloak of levitation fluttering as he unleashed a barrage of the 7 sons of Cinnabis. The golden orbs of fire slammed into Kang's chronal shield, creating a localized explosion of mystical and scientific heat. The Reaper, however, had seen enough of both factions. The logic core flared to a blinding violet. The neural tendril suddenly detached from the variants and turned towards the center of the room, lashing out like whips made of high-voltage data. One caught Monica, disrupting her energy form and sending her crashing into a processing vat. Another snagged Peter's ankle, pulling him towards the core's gravitational event horizon. Peter! Shepard scrambled to her feet, her biotics surging to their absolute limit. She didn't fire her rifle. She channeled every ounce of her Mass Effect field into a singularity directly between Peter and the core. The 2 gravitational forces clashed, creating a pocket of zero-G that allowed Peter to break free and web-zip to safety. Commander, the core is destabilizing. Edie's voice was frantic now. The interaction between the Sorcerer's magic, the Centurion's chronal energy, and the Reaper's logic is creating a localized reality collapse. If you don't vent the energy now, the resulting explosion won't just destroy the ship, it will trigger a chain reaction that will unravel the Sol System's timeline. Shepard looked at the core. She looked at Kang, who was still trying to reach for the data stream. She looked at Strange, who was struggling to maintain the barrier. There was no perfect tactical solution. There was only the choice. Monica, use the oscillation I gave you, Shepard yelled, her voice a command that cut through the cacophony of the collapsing room. Strange, give her a window. I'm going to overload the pylon manually with a biotic flare. Shepard, if you do that at the center of a reality collapse, your signature will be scattered across the multiverse, Strange warned, his hands trembling as he held the crimson bands. I won't be able to pull you back. Then don't pull me back, Shepard replied, her eyes locked on the violet heart of the machine. Just make sure the world is still here when the smoke clears. She ran. She didn't use cover, she used speed and raw biotic power. She charged through a wall of synthesis units, her body a blur of cerulean light. She reached the central pylon and slammed her palm onto the interface. Her biotics didn't just flare, they erupted. She poured everything she was, the N7 soldier, the Citadel Spectre, the survivor of the Crucible, into the machine. The blue light of her biotics met the violet light of the Reaper and the green light of Kang's chronal energy. For a heartbeat, there was a perfect, terrible silence. Then the world turned white. Shepard felt herself being pulled apart, not by pain, but by perspective. She saw the branches of the multiverse, the timelines where Thanos won, the timelines where the Reaper succeeded, and the thin golden thread where they stood a chance. She felt the beacon of her soul being stretched across infinite points in space and time. Shepard, Peter's voice was the last thing she heard, a distant cry in a sea of static. When the light faded, the logic core was a smoking ruin of molten slag. The Reaper let out a final dying groan, its mechanical heart silenced. The synthesis units deactivated instantly, falling like puppets with their strings cut. The Prime Centurion was gone, vanished back into the time stream to lick his wounds and plot his next move. Strange, Monica, and Peter stood in the center of the dying ship as it began to break apart in the lunar orbit. The rift was closing, the violet energy being sucked back into the void. Where is she? Peter asked, his mask retracted, his eyes searching the debris. She's not here, Peter. She vented the energy. She became the conduit. Strange looked at the spot where Shepard had stood, his expression one of somber respect. She didn't die, Peter. She did what she always does. She made the choice that no one else could. She didn't just save our world. She anchored it. But far away, in a place where time and space were merely suggestions, a black and silver helmet lay in the dust of a world that hadn't been born yet. A gloved hand reached down and picked it up, a hand wreathed in the green energy of a conqueror. Interesting, a voice murmured. Very interesting indeed.
The SR-3 Normandy drifted in the lunar shadow, its sleek hull scarred by violet thermal burns and pitted by micrometeorites of dimensional shrapnel. Inside the cockpit, the silence was absolute, a heavy, suffocating thing that even the hum of the drive core couldn't penetrate. Peter Parker sat in the pilot seat, his hands resting on a flight console he barely understood. Beside him, Commander Shepard's M8 Avenger assault rifle lay across the dash, its thermal clip empty, its metallic surface cold. He wasn't looking at the stars. He was looking at the empty space where a woman of iron will and cerulean fire had stood only hours before. Commander Shepard is no longer appearing on any local or subquantum sensors. EDI's voice broke the silence. The AI sounded different, less precise, her synthesized tones carrying a hollow resonance that mimicked human grief. Her biometric signature has been scattered across a broad-spectrum harmonic of the multiverse. To use a Terran metaphor, the bell has been rung, and the commander is the sound.
She's not gone, EDI, his voice cracking. He gripped the edge of the seat. Strange said she anchored us. You don't anchor something by leaving it. The Sorcerer Supreme's terminology was metaphysical, Peter, EDI replied. Tactically, we are without a commanding officer, and the galaxy is currently waking up to the debris of a multiversal god scattered across the orbital plane of the moon. On Earth, the Shepard flare, the blinding cerulean and white burst that had signaled the Reaper's destruction, had been seen by billions. It wasn't just a light show, it was a physical sensation. Every person with an active X gene, every sorcerer in a sanctum, and every hero attuned to the energies of the universe had felt it. A momentary alignment, a feeling of being held in place. At SWORD headquarters, the atmosphere was one of frantic recovery. Monica Rambeau stood on the observation deck of the peak, her eyes flickering with a constant low-level ultraviolet glow. Since the explosion, she hadn't been able to fully power down. Her body was vibrating at a frequency that didn't belong to this reality. She could feel the echo of Shepard, a faint rhythmic pulse that seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. She gave us a window, Monica said, not turning as Nick Fury stepped up beside her. The director looked older, his one eye fixed on the salvage crews currently swarming the Reaper's remains near the lunar surface. I know, Fury grunted. The Kree are already protesting the unauthorized dimensional wreckage in their sector, the High Evolutionary is sending probes from the counter-Earth coordinates, and my people are reporting that several variants from the ship's vats survived the crash. We have a dozen Steve Rogers and 3 Natasha Romanoffs currently in medical isolation, none of whom know what year it is. It's not just the wreckage, Monica said, pointing toward a monitor showing a deep space sweep. The Reaper was a bridge, but the bridge didn't collapse cleanly. It left a wake, a dark energy trail that leads directly back to whatever reality the Reapers have already consumed. Shepard's absence had created a power vacuum, but not just a military one. Her unique beacon signature, the fusion of her Mass Effect soul and the Marvel Universe's influence had become a prize. Across the multiverse, in the glittering, impossible spires of Chronopolis, the Prime Centurion sat on his throne, nursing a hand that was still blackened by biotic frost. The commander has transcended, Kang murmured to his empty court, his blue mask reflecting a map of the fractured timelines. She is no longer a soldier, she is a frequency, and if I can tune my engines to her resonance, I can find the heart of the Reaper Collective before they find us. Back on the Normandy, Peter Parker was interrupted by a sharp, rhythmic tapping on the airlock. He jumped, his spider sense flaring, but the sensation wasn't a warning of danger, it was a feeling of order. He opened the hatch to find a squad of soldiers in gray and orange tactical gear, led by a woman with a cropped haircut and a look of absolute bureaucratic exhaustion. Mobius is busy, the woman said, stepping onto the ship without invitation. She held a glowing orange baton that pulsed with a cold temporal light. I'm Hunter B-15, Time Variance Authority. We're here for the N7 Anomalies equipment. She's not an anomaly, Peter snapped, standing his ground. She just saved your sacred timeline from being turned into a synthetic battery. The sacred timeline is a lie, kid, B-15 replied, her eyes softened slightly as she looked at the empty rifle on the dash. But the multiverse is a mess, and your commander just threw a vibranium brick through the window of a house that was already falling down. Her anchor didn't just stabilize your world, it created a knot, a point in time so dense that even the Council of Kangs can't untie it yet. So you're here to help? Peter asked. We're here to secure the tech, B-15 said, gesturing to her team. Reaper logic is a multiversal virus. If a piece of that ship falls into the wrong hands, Hydra, AIM, or even your own government, the harvest starts all over again. We need to prune the wreckage. And what about Shepard? Peter stepped closer. Strange said she's out there, somewhere. B-15 looked at her tempad, the screen scrolling through infinite branching lines of white light. One line, however, was pulsing blue. It wasn't a branch, it was a bridge, crossing through dozens of other realities, weaving them together into a chaotic, beautiful braid. She's not out there, B-15 said quietly. She's between. She's currently fighting a war on 100 fronts at the same time. Every version of the Reaper War that's happening in the multiverse is being influenced by her resonance. She's the ghost in the machine, kid, and as long as she's fighting, the Reapers can't finalize the synthesis. Suddenly, the Normandy sensor shrieked. A massive energy surge erupted from the moon, not from the wreckage, but from the void beside it. A new rift was opening, but it didn't glow with violet Reaper light. It was a jagged, golden fracture that smelled of ozone and ancient magic. Strange? Peter asked, but his spider sense was screaming now. From the golden rift, a ship emerged. It was ancient, its hull composed of a shifting white and gold marble that looked more like a temple than a spacecraft. It was a vessel of the Eternals, but its banners were torn, and its hull was stained with the black ichor of the harvest. The Reapers have found the World Forge, B-15 whispered, her face turning ashen. They're not just harvesting life anymore. They're going after the source. They're going after the Celestials. Peter grabbed Shepard's rifle. He didn't know how to use the biotics, and he didn't have her tactical genius, but he remembered the look in her eyes before the light took her, the look of a soldier who refused to accept an ending. EDI, get us moving, Peter commanded. We're going to help that ship. Peter? Monica's voice came over the comms from the peak. You're not a commander. You're a kid from Queens. No, Peter said, his voice steady for the first time in years. I'm an Avenger, and the commander told me that heroism isn't about the power you have, it's about the choice you make when the world is ending. And right now, I'm choosing to fight. As the Normandy surged forward toward the Golden Rift, the cerulean echo of Shepard's resonance flared in the cockpit, a faint, ghostly hand seemingly resting on Peter's shoulder. The multiversal Reaper War had only just begun, and though the anchor was scattered, the ship was still sailing.
Section 7. Nowhere was a city of the dead that refused to stop screaming. The severed, rotting skull of a celestial, drifting on the edge of the universe, was normally a hive of industrial mining and black market decadence. But now, it was a graveyard of neon and iron. As the Benatar banked into the docking bay, the Guardians of the Galaxy didn't see the usual bustling crowds of Ravagers and traders. They saw fires. They saw the flickering, violet discharge of Reaper tech energy pulsing through the Celestials' nerve conduits like a necrotic fever. The station wasn't just under attack, it was being digested. "I got a bad feeling about this, Quill," Rocket growled, his paws dancing across the Benatar's weapons console. "My sensors are picking up a broadcast on every frequency. It sounds like 100 chainsaws hitting a trash compactor. It's that Reaper noise Shepard warned us about." "She didn't just warn us, Rocket," Peter Quill replied, his hand resting on the hilt of his blasters. His face was set in a grim mask. Since the Shepard flare had washed over the galaxy, Peter had felt a strange, rhythmic thrumming in his bones, a call of duty he hadn't felt since the war with Thanos. She anchored us. We're not letting her down. As the ramp hissed open, the air of nowhere hit them, cold, smelling of ozone and rotted organic matter. Suddenly, the space in front of the Guardians buckled. A cerulean spark erupted, a violent discharge of biotic energy that coalesced into a familiar silhouette. Commander Shepard stood before them, but she wasn't a woman of flesh and blood. She was a spectral soldier, her form a translucent blue and white resonance that flickered like a holographic glitch. Her N7 armor was a ghost of light, and her eyes were twin stars of multiversal energy. "Commander," Drax asked, tilting his head, "you have become very thin and blue. Have you forgotten to eat in the void between worlds?" "I'm a resonance, Drax," Shepard's voice echoed, sounding like it was coming from every direction at once. She looked at her hands, which were sparking with Mass Effect fields. "The explosion in the logic core, it didn't kill me. It scattered my signature across the harmonic frequencies of the multiverse. I'm currently occupying every what-if of the Reaper War simultaneously. But this artifact in Tevin's vault, it's acting as a lightning rod. It's pulling me back into this specific reality." "The Collector," Nebula said, her robotic eyes scanning the burning streets. "He has a Prothean Marvel hybrid, the Aethel Core. He claims it was recovered from a rift near the Kree border cycles ago. He didn't know what it was until the Reapers started knocking on his door." "We need that core," Shepard said, her spectral form stabilizing as she focused her will. "It contains the decryption keys for the Reapers' new physics, the way they're using celestial energy to bypass the laws of thermodynamics. If we can get it, EDI can transmit a virus to the entire multiversal fleet. We can turn their own synthesis against them." They moved through the streets of nowhere, a chaotic squad of misfits led by a multiversal ghost. The indoctrinated were everywhere, Ravagers with glowing violet implants in their eyes and mechanical tentacles erupting from their spines lunged from the shadows. Shepard didn't need a rifle. She moved like a bolt of biotic lightning, her spectral hands unleashing shockwaves that tore through the possessed miners with the force of a supernova. "Stay close," Shepard commanded. "The indoctrination signal is strongest near the vault. It's using the Celestials' lingering brainwaves to amplify the broadcast." They reached the Collector's Museum, a fortress of glass and gold that had been breached from the inside. Tevin himself was cowering behind a display case of dark matter orbs, his flamboyant robes singed, his white hair a wild mess of terror. "The specimen," Tevin shrieked as Shepard drifted into the room. "The transcendent soldier. Oh, what a magnificent addition to the collection you would be. A being that exists in every reality at once. I'll pay any price." "The Aethel Core, Tevin. Now," Shepard said, her voice dropping into a resonant, bone-shaking tone. The blue light of her biotics began to crack the glass displays around her. "It's in the high-security wing," the Collector stammered, pointing a trembling finger toward a heavy, vibranium-reinforced door. "But you cannot have it. The machines, they've already found it. They're talking to it." The door exploded outward, not from an external blast, but from a surge of violet light. A
Synthesis Prime Unit, a terrifying fusion of a Kree accuser and Reaper tech, stepped into the hall. Its hammer was wraithed in dark energy, and its eyes were cold, synthetic pits. In its other hand, it held the Aethel Core, a pulsing golden-violet orb that hummed with the power of the dying sun. "The harvest is absolute," the synthesis accuser intoned, its voice a metallic roar. "Your universe is now being indexed for deletion." "Not today, Tin Can," Rocket yelled, unleashing a barrage of high-explosive rounds from his customized cannon. The accuser didn't flinch. It raised its hammer, creating a gravity well that absorbed the explosives. But Shepard was already moving. She didn't just charge, she phased. She disappeared from one side of the room and reappeared directly behind the accuser, her spectral hand reaching through the creature's chest. She wasn't trying to rip out its heart, she was overriding its logic. The cerulean energy of her beacon signature flooded the creature's systems, creating a feedback loop between the Reaper's hive mind and the multiversal static Shepard was currently carrying. "Nebula, the core," Shepard strained, her ghostly form flickering violently. "I can't hold this frequency. Take it and get back to the Normandy." Nebula lunged, her own cybernetic limbs moving with lethal precision. She snatched the Aethel Core from the accuser's dying grip. Peter Quill fired his blasters, the elemental rounds striking the accuser's joints, while Drax buried his daggers in its neck. The accuser let out a final electronic shriek before collapsing into a pile of ashen circuitry. But the victory was short-lived. The walls of nowhere began to groan. The Reaper fleet outside was closing in, their beams beginning to carve into the celestial skull. "The station is being decommissioned," Shepard yelled, her form starting to fade as the artifact's distance increased. "Quill, get out of here. Take the core to Peter Parker on the Normandy. He's at the World Forge." "What about you?" Peter Quill reached out, but his hand passed through her blue-tinted arm. "Shepard, we can't do this without you." "I'm everywhere, Peter," Shepard said, a ghost of a smile touching her translucent face. "I'll meet you at the end of the line. Now move." As the Guardians scrambled back to the Benatar, Shepard stood alone in the center of the Collector's ruined museum. She looked at the burning sky of nowhere, watching the massive H-shaped Reaper ships descend. She raised her ghostly hand, and for a moment the blue light of her resonance flared with enough intensity to push back the violet gloom. Across the multiverse, 100 versions of Commander Shepard were doing the same thing. In 100 different wars, she was the variable that refused to be solved. And on Nowhere, as the Celestial's head began to crack under the strain of the harvest, the commander let out a final, defiant biotic pulse that sent a message to the entire Reaper fleet. "We are not your data. We are the heroes of this story." She disappeared in a flash of cerulean light, leaving the Collector alone with his ruined treasures and the echo of a soldier who would never truly die.
Section 7. Nowhere was a city of the dead that refused to stop screaming. The severed, rotting skull of a celestial drifting on the edge of the universe was normally a hive of industrial mining and black market decadence. But now it was a graveyard of neon and iron. As the Benatar banked into the docking bay, the Guardians of the Galaxy didn't see the usual bustling crowds of ravagers and traders. They saw fires. They saw the flickering, violet discharge of Reaper tech energy pulsing through the Celestial's nerve conduits like a necrotic fever. The station wasn't just under attack, it was being digested. "I got a bad feeling about this, Quill," Rocket growled, his paws dancing across the Benatar's weapons console. "My sensors are picking up a broadcast on every frequency. It sounds like 100 chainsaws hitting a trash compactor. It's that Reaper noise Shepard warned us about." "She didn't just warn us, Rocket," Peter Quill replied, his hand resting on the hilt of his blasters. His face was set in a grim mask. Since the Shepard flare had washed over the galaxy, Peter had felt a strange, rhythmic thrumming in his bones, a call of duty he hadn't felt since the war with Thanos. She anchored us. We're not letting her down. As the ramp hissed open, the air of Nowhere hit them, cold, smelling of ozone and rotted organic matter. Suddenly, the space in front of the Guardians buckled. A cerulean spark erupted, a violent discharge of biotic energy that coalesced into a familiar silhouette. Commander Shepard stood before them, but she wasn't a woman of flesh and blood. She was a spectral soldier, her form a translucent blue and white resonance that flickered like a holographic glitch. Her N7 armor was a ghost of light, and her eyes were twin stars of multiversal energy. "Commander," Drax asked, tilting his head, "you have become very thin and blue. Have you forgotten to eat in the void between worlds?"
I'm a resonance, Drax, Shepard's voice echoed, sounding like it was coming from every direction at once. She looked at her hands, which were sparking with Mass Effect fields. The explosion in the logic core, it didn't kill me. It scattered my signature across the harmonic frequencies of the multiverse. I'm currently occupying every what-if of the Reaper Wars simultaneously. But this artifact in Tevin's vault, it's acting as a lightning rod. It's pulling me back into this specific reality. The Collector, Nebula said, her robotic eyes scanning the burning streets. He has a Prothean Marvel hybrid, the Aethel Core. He claims it was recovered from a rift near
The World Forge did not look like a factory. It looked like the dawn of time captured in a cage of golden marble and shifting geometry. Floating in the deep, silent expanse of the null space between realities, the Forge was where the Celestials breathed life into the seeds of planets. It was a place of absolute creation, a cathedral of cosmic fire. But now, that fire was being choked by a familiar, oily darkness. As the SR-3 Normandy punched through the shimmering veil of the Forge's outer defenses, Peter Parker gasped. A Harbinger-class Reaper, its hull twisted into a jagged, multi-dimensional spear, had impaled itself into the side of a nascent Celestial, a being of unfathomable scale that was still being knit together by the Forge's automated systems. EDI, tell me that thing isn't doing what I think it's doing, Peter said, his knuckles white as he gripped the N7 rifle. The Reaper is initiating a macro-synthesis protocol, EDI's voice replied, her holographic avatar flickering with a golden yellow light as she tapped into the Forge's ancient data stream. It is not merely harvesting the Celestial's biological matter, it is rewriting its foundational code. It is attempting to create a Celestial Reaper, a god machine that can traverse the multiverse without the need for rifts or anchors. If they succeed, the harvest becomes instantaneous across all timelines. Not on our watch, Peter said, though his voice wavered. He looked at Monica Rambeau and Dr. Strange, who were standing on the bridge, their faces illuminated by the gold and violet light of the battle outside. Strange, can you get us onto that forge? We need to stop the processing before that big guy wakes up as a giant angry squid god. Strange didn't look at the forge. He was looking at the air beside Peter. I don't need to, Peter. The commander is already there. A flicker of cerulean light erupted in the cockpit. Commander Shepard's spectral form appeared, but she looked different, sharper, more focused. She wasn't just a ghost, she was a combat interface. She had projected her resonance through the Normandy's communication arrays, her blue-tinted eyes scanning the tactical display with the cold precision of a veteran. Peter, listen to me, Shepard's voice echoed, sounding clearer than it had on Nowhere. The Forge is a closed system. The Reapers are using the Celestial's internal energy to power the indoctrination broadcast. If we hit the Reaper from the outside, the feedback loop will shatter the Forge and kill everyone inside. We have to go into the mind of the Forge, the central processing core where the Celestial soul is being rewritten. And do what? Monica asked, her form glowing with an intense gamma-ray brilliance. If we destroy the soul, we destroy the Celestial. We don't destroy it, Shepard replied. We respec it. We use the Aethel Core that Quill is bringing to overwrite the Reaper's viral code with a Paragon logic string. We turn the Celestial's awakening into a defensive pulse that will incinerate every Reaper tech signature in this sector. Suddenly, the Normandy shuddered. A swarm of oculi, small spherical Reaper drones, descended from the Harbinger's hull, their violet beams carving into the Normandy's kinetic barriers. We're being swarmed, Peter yelled, jumping into the pilot seat. EDI, give me the manual controls. I've done this in a flight sim. How much harder can the real thing be? Significantly, EDI noted, but she slaved the controls to Peter's station. The Normandy danced through the golden pillars of the Forge, Peter's spider sense acting as a high-speed navigational computer. He maneuvered the ship with a reckless, web-swinging grace, dodging Reaper beams and weaving through the massive, crystalline ribs of the Celestial in progress. Monica surged out of the airlock, becoming a streak of blinding white light that punched through the oculi swarms like a needle through silk. As they reached the entrance to the Forge's core, a massive, rotating iris of gold and silver metal, the Harbinger let out a bone-shaking roar. A wave of violet indoctrination energy swept over the ship. Peter felt a sudden crushing weight on his mind. He saw his Uncle Ben. He saw Gwen Stacy. He saw the faces of everyone he couldn't save. Why fight? The Reaper's voice whispered. In the synthesis, there is no loss. There is only the collective. Let us archive your pain. Don't listen to it, Peter. Shepard's voice cut through the fog like a biotic flare. Her spectral hand seemed to rest on his shoulder.
Pain is what makes us human. Loss is the price we pay for love. You're an Avenger. You're a hero because you keep going when the world tells you to stop. Peter let out a ragged breath, his eyes snapping open. He slammed the Normandy's throttles forward. "I'm a kid from Queens," he roared, "and we don't like bullies." The ship shot through the iris just as it began to close. Inside, the World Forge was a silent, golden ocean of liquid data. At the center, the Celestial's heart, a massive, glowing orb of pure white energy, was being encased in a web of violet Reaper tentacles. The Benatar dropped out of work behind them, Peter Quill and the Guardians yelling over the comms. "We got the core, Shepard, but we've got a lot of company." Behind the Guardians, a swarm of processed Eternals, beings of immense power now turned into husks of gold and violet, emerged from the shadows of the Forge. They moved with a terrifying synchronized grace, their cosmic energy now serving the harvest. "Strange, Monica, hold the line," Shepard commanded, her spectral form flaring bright enough to illuminate the entire chamber. "Quill, get that core to the heart. Peter, you have to be the one to plug it in. Your spider sense is the only thing that can navigate the neural feedback loop." "Me?" Peter asked, his voice cracking. "Shepard, I'm not you." "You don't have to be me," Shepard said, and for a moment her spectral hand felt solid against his arm. "You did good, kid. You're the best of us." She merged with the heart. The cerulean light flared one last time, a pillar of fire that stabilized the Forge and sent the remaining Reaper fleet into a retreat toward the dark spaces of the multiverse. The Normandy and the Benatar shot out of the Forge just as the iris sealed forever. Beyond them, the null space went silent. The World Forge was gone, tucked away in a pocket of reality where the Reapers could never find it again. On the bridge of the Normandy, Peter Parker sat on the floor, the empty N7 rifle in his lap. He was alive. The world was safe. But the anchor was gone. "Shepard?" he whispered into the silence. There was no answer, only the faint, rhythmic thrum of the drive core, sounding like a heartbeat.
The World Forge didn't die with a whimper. It died with a chorus of 10,000 heroic lives. As the SR-3 Normandy and the Benatar punched through the final, shimmering veil of null space back into the Marvel Universe's lunar orbit, the sight that met them was one of absolute celestial carnage. The Paragon pulse Peter Parker had triggered within the Forge had rippled across the multiversal rift, but the Reapers were not merely machines to be turned off. They were a virus that had spent eons learning how to survive a cure. The infected fleet, now glowing with a chaotic, flickering cerulean light, was trapped in a state of violent logic looping, their hulls tearing themselves apart as Shepard's memories of courage clashed with their foundational code of harvest. "They're eating themselves," Rocket yelled, his paws flying across the Benatar scanners. "The Reaper logic is trying to purge the hero data, but Shepard's resonance is too deep. It's like their entire hive mind is having a nervous breakdown." "It's an incursion of the soul," Dr. Strange observed, his hands weaving a protective barrier around the two ships. "The commander isn't just a virus, she's an ideal. She's showing them every version of the universe where they lose because people refuse to give up. The machines can't calculate that level of irrational hope." But the victory was being snatched away by a different kind of predator. The Prime Centurion, the Kang variant who had been waiting in the shadows of the time stream, had reappeared. He wasn't on a ship. He was standing on the hull of the dying Harbinger Reaper, his violet and green armor wreathed in the chronal energies of the quantum realm. In his hand, he held a crystalline siphon, a device designed to harvest the Paragon energy radiating from the rift. "You fools!" Kang's voice boomed through every communication channel, a multi-tonal roar that bypassed the vacuum of space. "You have created a localized singularity of pure heroic potential. If I capture this resonance, I can rewrite the history of every timeline. I will not just rule the multiverse, I will be the architect of its very essence." "Not if we have anything to say about it," Peter Parker shouted, his voice cracking with a mix of fear and N7-inspired resolve. He didn't wait for a tactical plan. He launched himself out of the Normandy's airlock, his suit's thrusters, a gift from Stark and Shepard, burning hot. He was a red and blue streak against the violet and gold chaos of the collapsing rift. "Peter, get back here!" Monica Rambeau yelled, surging after him as a beam of pure ultraviolet light.
Shepard's spectral resonance flared in the space between the ships. She wasn't a woman anymore. She was a bridge of blue light. She saw Kang reaching for the heart of the flare, his scepter glowing with a sickly green chronal hunger. She felt the Reaper's dying screams, their cold logic finally being extinguished by the warmth of her own sacrifice. But she also felt the Marvel Universe tilting. Without an anchor, the energy she had released would either save the multiverse or become the tool of its ultimate tyrant. Strange, Shepard's voice echoed in the sorcerer's mind, a resonant, bone-deep command. The Centurion is trying to curate the explosion. He's trying to turn the Paragon Pulse into a chronal reset. You have to stop him from finalizing the siphon. I can't reach him, Shepard, Strange replied, his brow sweating as he held back the dimensional shearing. He's phased his own timeline 3 seconds ahead of ours. Every spell I cast hits where he was, not where he is. Then I'll be the bridge, Shepard said. In a display of biotic power that defied the laws of both her old world and her new one, the spectral commander manifested herself directly on the hull of the Harbinger. She didn't occupy a single point in space. She occupied the entirety of the Reaper's dying moments. She grabbed Kang's scepter with a ghostly hand wreathed in the blue fire of a supernova. You are a ghost, Kang hissed, his blue mask inches from Shepard's translucent face. You have no power over the master of time. I'm a soldier, Kang, Shepard replied, her voice a calm, lethal resonance. And a soldier knows that the only way to stop a fire is to deprive it of oxygen. You want the Paragon energy, then take all of it. She didn't pull back, she pushed. She used her beacon signature to draw the entirety of the Paragon Pulse, the combined heroic legacy of 1,000 what-ifs, directly into her own spectral form. The cerulean light became blinding, a pillar of fire that connected the moon to the heart of the multiverse. She became the conduit, the lightning rod for the energy of 1,000,000 heroes. No, Kang screamed, his scepter beginning to crack under the sheer weight of the heroic logic. It's too much. It's irrational. It's inefficient. It's humanity, Shepard roared. The explosion wasn't an explosion of heat. It was an explosion of choice. A wave of cerulean and white energy swept across the lunar orbit. It hit Kang, shattering his scepter and hurling him back into the deep, dark spaces of the quantum realm, his armor stripped of its grapple power. It hit the remaining Reaper fleet, finally dissolving their synthetic shells into harmless dust. And it hit the rift, sealing the fracture with a stitch of heroic energy that resonated with the frequency of the Marvel 616 timeline. Peter Parker and Monica Rambeau were thrown back toward the Normandy by the sheer pressure of the light. They watched as the spectral commander, the woman who had become the anchor of their reality, began to fade into the closing rift. Shepard, Peter reached out, his hand grasping at the blue sparks. The commander looked at him, and for a heartbeat, she looked solid again. She looked like the soldier who had first fallen on a yellow cab in Manhattan. She gave him a sharp N7 salute, a gesture of respect from one hero to another. Keep the engines hot, Peter, she whispered, her voice a soft, fading echo. The mission isn't over. It's just changing. The rift snapped shut with a sound like a single triumphant heartbeat. The violet light of the Reapers was gone. The green chronal energy of Kang was gone. The moon sat silent in the void, illuminated by the cold, distant sun. On the bridge of the SR-3 Normandy, the Avengers stood in silence. The tactical screens were clear. The sensors were silent. The multiversal Reaper war was over, but the chair at the head of the briefing table was empty. She did it, Monica said, her voice trembling. She sealed the breach. She turned the harvest into a reset. Dr. Strange looked at the spot where the rift had been. He could still feel the echo of her, a faint rhythmic pulse of cerulean energy that had woven itself into the fabric of their reality. She didn't just seal it, Monica. She became the boundary. As long as her resonance exists, the Reapers can never find this door again. She is the watcher of the N7 now. Peter Parker picked up Shepard's empty rifle. He didn't feel like a kid from Queens anymore. He felt the weight of the legacy she had left him, the weight of the anchor. The commander isn't gone, Peter said, looking out at the stars. When the next big threat comes, when the next Titan or Conqueror thinks they can just archive us, he looked at the rifle, then back at the Avengers. We'll be ready, because we're the ones she left behind to watch the gate. Outside, in the cold silence of space, a single blue spark drifted past the window of the Normandy, a faint, defiant flicker of biotic light that refused to go out.
Section 10. The return of the SR-3 Normandy to the orbital berth of the Peak was not a victory parade, it was a homecoming for a ghost ship. As the docking clamps magnetized with a heavy industrial thud, the silence that filled the hangar was heavier than the vacuum of space they had just escaped. Peter Parker stepped off the ramp first, Shepard's M8 Avenger slung over his shoulder. He moved with a heavy, measured stride that made the SWORD agents in the bay stop and stare. He wasn't the exuberant kid from Queens anymore. He looked like a soldier who had seen the end of the world and decided he wasn't finished with it yet. Behind him came Monica Rambeau and Dr. Strange. Monica's skin still hummed with a faint ultraviolet glow, a permanent reminder of the energy she had channeled in the World Forge. Strange's cloak of levitation was singed at the edges, and his eyes carried the weight of a man who had watched a fixed point in time become a fluid, living thing. Nick Fury was waiting at the foot of the ramp, his hands clasped behind his back, his one good eye fixed on the empty space behind Peter. He didn't ask where the commander was. He could see it in the way the Normandy's hull shimmered, a faint cerulean iridescence that didn't belong to any earthly paint or alloy. "Report," Fury commanded, his voice raspy but steady. "The rift is sealed, Director," Peter said, his voice dropping into a register that echoed Shepard's own. "The Reaper fleet has been dismantled by a logic loop. The Paragon pulse wiped out their hive mind and purged the processed variants. They're just junk now, drifting in the null space." "And the Centurion?" "Gone," Strange replied, stepping forward. His scepter was shattered and his chronal anchor was severed. He's lost in the quantum realm without a way to navigate the Paragon frequency. He won't be a problem for a long time. Fury looked up at the stars, toward the moon where the wreckage of the Harbinger was still visible as a dark smudge against the lunar surface. "And the commander?" "I'm seeing some unusual readings from the orbital sensors. A rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat made of Mass Effect fields." "She didn't just destroy the rift, Fury," Monica said, her voice soft but filled with a strange, fierce pride. "She became the seal. She merged her signature with the foundational code of the World Forge. She's the anchor now. As long as her resonance exists, our reality is tuned to a frequency the Reapers can't decipher. We are invisible to the harvest." The days that followed were a whirlwind of multiversal triage. The Shepard flare hadn't just saved the world, it had fundamentally rewritten how Earth and the galaxy viewed its place in the multiverse. The Systems Alliance wasn't a dream of the future anymore, it was the necessity of the present. Under the guidance of the remaining Avengers and the technical blueprints left in the Normandy's archives, SWORD was reorganized into the First Spectre Command. They were no longer just Earth's defenders, they were the guardians of the border. Using the Reaper wreckage, Shuri and Peter Parker developed the N7 Protocol, a specialized training and equipment program designed to create soldiers who could fight across dimensional rifts. The first recruits weren't just humans, they were Kree, Skrull, and even a few of the variant heroes who had been recovered from the Reaper vats and chose to stay in this timeline to earn a new life. Peter Parker took the lead. He spent his days in the training rooms, teaching the new Spectres how to move, how to think, and how to stay human when the scale of the universe tried to crush them. He kept Shepard's rifle in a glass case in the center of the SWORD briefing room, not as a relic, but as a reminder. "She used to say that we don't have the luxury of being afraid," Peter told a group of recruits one morning, his eyes reflecting the blue light of the station's tactical displays. "She faced a Titan who wanted to kill half of us, and she faced a machine that wanted to harvest all of us, and she did it by reminding us that we were more than just variables in an equation. We're the heroes of this story." Deep in the Sanctum Sanctorum, Dr. Strange sat in meditation, his astral form drifting through the layers of the multiverse. He could see the Shepard knot, a bright cerulean braid of energy that weaved through the fractured timelines, holding them together against the encroaching darkness. He realized that Shepard hadn't just anchored Marvel 616, she had created a safe harbor for 1,000 other worlds. Every time a hero in another reality made a Paragon choice, a sacrifice for the many, a refusal to give in to despair, her resonance flared, strengthening the bond between universes. "She was the veteran we needed," murmured to the empty room, the one who had already seen the end, so she could show us how to prevent it. But the most profound change was felt on the Normandy itself. The ship remained in service, piloted by Edie and Peter Parker, serving as the flagship of the new multiversal vanguard. Those who walked its halls often reported hearing a faint rhythmic tapping on the consoles, or catching a glimpse of a black and silver silhouette in the corner of their eye. It wasn't a haunting, it was a presence, a commander who was still on duty, watching over her crew from the spaces between breaths. One evening, as the Normandy drifted past the newly constructed Citadel station at the lunar L5 point, Peter Parker sat in the mess hall, drinking a coffee and looking at an old, grainy photo of the original Avengers team.
Suddenly, the ship's lights flickered. A soft, cerulean glow filled the room. "Commander?" Peter whispered, his heart racing. A holographic interface appeared on the table, not a sword display, but a Prothean Mass Effect hybrid. A map of the deeper multiverse appeared, showing a cluster of stars that didn't belong to their galaxy. A single point pulsed with a steady blue light. It was a mission marker. "Peter," Edie's voice came over the intercom, sounding more vibrant than ever. "I have received a localized transmission from the anchor frequency. It is a set of coordinates located within the negative zone. There is a breach forming, not a Reaper, but something else. Something ancient." Peter stood up, a slow, determined smile spreading across his face. He grabbed his mask and headed for the lift. He didn't need to ask who had sent the coordinates. He knew. "Alert the Spectres," Peter commanded, "and tell Monica to get the drive core hot. We've got a job to do." As the SR-3 Normandy surged toward the new rift, its engines glowing with a cerulean fire that matched the stars, the Marvel multiverse felt a little less vast and a little more like home. The commander was gone, but her war was far from over, and as long as there were heroes willing to follow her lead, the harvest would never come. Conclusion. The saga of Commander Shepard in the Marvel Universe began as a collision of two heroic ideals and ended as the foundation of a new multiversal order. From the streets of New York to the heart of the World Forge, the N7 commander proved that the Mass Effect was not just a law of physics, but a law of the soul. She took a fractured team of heroes who had been broken by the Infinity Stones and forged them into a vanguard capable of staring down the very architects of existence. Her sacrifice didn't just seal a rift, it created a legend. In the archives of SWORD, the TVA, and the Sanctum Sanctorum, Shepard is recorded not as a visitor, but as the constant, the hero who was brave enough to be the anchor. The Marvel Universe remains a place of gods and monsters, of cosmic threats and multiversal chaos, but it is now a universe that understands the price of victory. The Reapers are a memory of a harvest that failed, and Thanos is a ghost of a philosophy that was outmatched by a soldier's resolve. The mission continues, the legend grows, and somewhere in the light between worlds, the commander is still leading the way. Post-credit scene. In the silent white halls of the TVA, a monitor flickers to life. It shows a single blue line of light cutting through a sea of red branches. A figure in a green cloak watches the screen, his face hidden in shadow. "She has stabilized the sector," a voice whispers. "The harvest is diverted, but the council is displeased. The N7 variant must be accounted for." The figure turns, revealing a face with the familiar, arrogant features of a Kang variant. "Then we won't send an army," he says, smiling. "We'll send a Reaper of our own." With great power comes great responsibility. More stories await.